Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through the Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones, switching off your video when you are not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you are in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please do not repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to the reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone else to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, but I do anticipate we'll deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. Before I move on in today's business, I wanted to highlight the achievements of some of our officer team. Dumfries and Galloway Council was represented for the first time at the National Go Awards. The Go Awards celebrate the very best procurement achievements from across Scotland's public, private and third sector organisations and are Scotland's leading public procurement excellence awards. Deborah Burns and Rebecca Scott were both shortlisted as finalists under the Go Awards Procurement People of Tomorrow category for this year, which recognises the investment made by the Council in improving our procurement capability and in particular in the corporate procurement team. Both Deborah and Rebecca joined the corporate procurement team 5 years ago. Deborah as a career changer and Rebecca following a successful completion of the Council's graduate programme. Through the Council's investment, both have progressed very well in their professional careers, with both most recently being appointed as category managers. On behalf of the FPT committee, I would like to pass on our congratulations and thanks to Rebecca and Deborah for the continued efforts and professional success. Very well done. So, item number 1, Sederant apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Nick, can you please provide the Sederant and any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have 2 apologies this morning, one from the Chair, Councillor Hislop, another from Councillor Brodie. We have 12 members present in the hall and we have 5 members present on Microsoft Teams, being Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillors Dennerley, Hagman, Marshall and Young. 2 members not present at the start of the meeting, Councillors Doogie Campbell and Gail McGregor. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. And I approve of members' remote participation. Item number 2.
Apologies, Chair, for Doogie Campbell.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Scobie. Thank you. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or a statement of connection they wish to make? No? Fantastic. Item number 3, minutes of the previous meeting of August 29, 2023. Can we please note the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of August? Noted. Thank you. So, item number 4. The Council Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2023-24 for the period ended 30th September 2023 being the second quarter. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides members with an overview of the Council's overall financial performance for the second quarter of the current financial year, highlighting the main issues that are anticipated to impact on the Council's position, including the pay award negotiations and other budgetary pressures. Gillian Ross and Paul Garrett are here today to assist members if they have any questions. And I'll open for members' questions. Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 21, item 4.9, is that a typo error? £162.49p per litre? if it's no, we're got to be bankrupt.
Yes, I believe it may well be. Apologies for that. We'll have that amended.
Thanks, Chair.
And Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points. At page 23, 4.25, obviously we're aware of getting the VAT refund, which is very welcome. It does state here the Council will receive approximately 2.1 million after deduction of advisor fees. I just wondered what approximately will the advisor fees be and who are these advisors? And then my second point is on 4.23. It's the rack panels within the school estate, the 500,000 that we got used from the loan charges. I did read, though, I think it's maybe in the ER papers that are coming next week, that we have found some rack in Annan swimming pool. So I'm just wondering if that 500,000 will also cover the work that's required at Annan swimming pool.
Grand. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Paul, would you like to give it on that one?
Yep, thanks, Chair. So in terms of the VAT refund, that was backdated to 2007. It was an exercise that was taken forward by KPMG as advisors in support of a number of different local authorities. Part of the arrangement with KPMG was that they received 10% of the amount recovered by councils. So we, including interest in the backdating, actually received £2.3 million. That the 10% charged from KPMG is around about £200,000 to £230,000. So that's where the £2.1 million net benefit comes from, that's reflected in the paper. In terms of the RAC, I'm conscious that we've got a RAC report further on the agenda. My understanding is that the £500,000 is an estimate based on the RAC that had been identified up to that stage, and the subsequent report does refer to a wider RAC removal programme over a period going forward. So I'm not 100% sure if there's a specific allowance for Annan swimming pool at this stage in those figures. I don't know if Lorna want to come in terms of that.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Marshall. So this relates, the report on this committee relates to RAC in schools. The assessment at Annan swimming pool is currently underway, and we will come back to members with any requirements around Annan swimming pool in relation to the RAC that's been found there.
Does that satisfy our question, Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
And we have Councillor Hagman.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, and good morning, members. It's on a similar point to the point that's just been raised about the VAT refund, the 2.1 million. And I just, on page 23, 4.25, it says in the paragraph, it is suggested that this amount should be added. Now, I'm not sure, I'm aware that we note reports and we agree reports. I'm not sure what the governance is about suggestions of. So will we be getting a report back once we get these figures fully confirmed, so we can actually make that decision as to what, the purpose of that 2.1, because, a suggestion is just that. It's not an agreement. So it's really the governance around that. And again, on the similar point about the RAC, a note on item 7 and item 8, we have various funding amounts that we're being asked to look at, and it all comes under the unallocated capital funds balance. So, I mean, we'll maybe come back to that, but we've got the amount on the Appendix 1 of 3.950k, a million, sorry. But then on page 50 in item 7, we're being asked to allocate that full amount. And then on page 65 in item 8, there's almost a repeat of that 500k. So again, maybe perhaps in future reports we can separate these out, because the same amount of funding appears to appear 3 times in various reports. I appreciate this as an overall snapshot of where we're at, but it's not particularly clear, and certainly going forward it would be really useful to have a full understanding, because I'm not quite sure what we're agreeing at which point, or are we agreeing things twice? I'm not quite sure. It's just some clear governance would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. As far as how we utilise the 2.1 million, given the ongoing financial pressures that we face as a council, pay negotiations, fairly high inflation still, I think it's prudent to act wisely and sensibly with that. I don't know if Paul would like to add something else to that. Paul?
Yes, no, 100% agree with that Chair. In terms of Councillor Hagman's question, in terms of the governance, and there's not a recommendation in relation to that at this stage. What we would actually come back and do is at the financial year end, provide members with information and seek agreement as to what year-end balances and what year-end reserves should be. But what I try to reflect in the paper is that this may be something that members wish to take into consideration as part of their budget setting process. Obviously, there's some other developments that are having a more negative impact on the council's financial position, including impact to the council tax freeze and the ongoing pay negotiations and the council's contribution towards that. So we'll look to take that into account and give members a more thorough and comprehensive overview of the overall funding position once the Scottish Government budget's announced at the end of December. So we'll take this into account at that stage. And just coming back to the second question, understand Councillor Hagman's point in terms of the references to the RAC fund, and it's the same £500,000 that we're referring to in the reports. I think there's a specific report on RAC which explains the detail on why that funding is required. It's referred to in the capital report because the loan charges underspend relates to a reduction in capital borrowing during the year. But it's because it feeds through into the loan charges underspend, and that is the source of the funding for that 500,000. That's why it's reflected in this report. But I appreciate it is mentioned in 3 different reports, but it is absolutely the same amount we're referring to.
Thank you, Paul. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Hagman?
In part, Chair, no, thank you, Paul, for that. I think it would be prudent to actually get a clear line and a decision on that 2.1 million, and if that's part of the budget process, I'd just like to see that clarity coming through. And just, I am looking at Appendix 1, and there's the sort of full allocation amounts there, but there's not a headline for reserves within that. So, I think, again, going forward, it'd be really useful to see what reserves we're holding. Absolutely appreciate that some of our reserves will be earmarked or allocated. So, that headline figure of reserves that we're holding isn't necessarily the full amount that we can utilise, but certainly I would actually request that we can get a full breakdown of the reserves that Council is holding. Thank you.
I think Paul would like to come back on that one there.
Yes, as I said earlier, we provide a full overview of reserves at each financial year, but also through this committee we've undertaken specific reviews in year of reserves. There was a very detailed report went to, I think it was the last committee, reviewing our reserves and released amounts to support overall financial pressures. So members have recently had that, and generally we wouldn't come back to updating reserves until the financial year end unless there was anything specific we wanted members to take into consideration. So I'm kind of conscious of a number of things that are being looked at the minute, so I wouldn't want necessarily to add to the papers unnecessarily, but if members were to wish that, it's something that could be done. But as I say, we did have a thorough review that's reported to the last meeting of this committee.
Thank you, Paul. So the suggestion would be there that it would be more prudent to come back at the end of the financial year to report that once again. Wonderful. Thank you. Sorry, on the same point, Councillor Thompson? Okay.
Sorry to come in, but given that we've just had the report recently and we're looking at 2.1 million and the year end's going to be after the budget, it might be easy just to update what could have been included in the appendix, just the table that says here's actually the current figures given the 2.1 million potentially that would be sitting in the reserve. So it might save, rather than a report, could just be that updated spreadsheet, if you like, circulated to members, if that would be easier. And it means, because there's timing issues about getting that at the end of the year, obviously, when we're talking about budgets, as Paul, you'd already mentioned about budget considerations, it'd be too late if we got it after that, eh? So maybe if we could do that, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sure going forward that could be incorporated out of the report. Or circulated? Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I'm looking at page 22, particularly with 4.14, 15 and 16, and there are 3 different figures mentioned in there. The first one talks about 1.25 million as a forecast of overspend in social work budget, and then it goes on in 4.15 to talk about 1.295 million of the corporate budget, and again reference to £1 million in social work support fund may also be progressed. If my memory serves me correctly, we were reflecting some 600,000 or thereabouts of an overspend at that particular time in social work, and indeed the acting chief social work officer was saying that he may have to come forward with a report asking for the £1 million reserve, where he may even exceed that. What is the true reflection of how that budget is doing? Particularly in terms of 4.16, where it talks here in short-term measures, when this is a demand-led budget that has seen an increase in the need for services in the community. So I just wonder, what is the true figure in that? And likewise in 4.19, when it talks about being able to manage the support for learner services, again, an increase in numbers who require that additional support. And we managed to find an increase, but are we going to be able to find increases on ensuing years? It's really just those 2 questions, Chair.
Could Gillian come in on those particular points?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm, the overall forecast overspend for social work at the moment is the 1.25 million that's referenced at 4.14. Obviously, as you've indicated, demand within social work changes on a daily basis, so that figure is subject to significant change month to month as decisions are made. So that's the reason why the change in forecast from the previously forecast details. Appendix 2 covers a lot of the details in terms of the pressures that are currently facing social work, and it does reference about the additional funding to be added for the implementation of the new SRA for the foster and the kinship cares, and that's taken into account as part of that forecast. The 1.295 is referencing the potential funding source to address that £1.25 million. So should that end up being the actual outturn at the end of the financial year, we can look to apply resources from that source, and if that is not sufficient, if things change during the year, we also have the £1 million set aside within the social work support fund to be able to support that. At the moment, we are undertaking significant reviews of the pressures within social work, working with colleagues and the interim chief social work officer to determine the extent to which these pressures may be ongoing and the extent to which resources may be required within the budget on an ongoing basis. The details associated with that will come forward to members as part of the budget development process and be taken into account as part of that. Is that okay in terms of the social work stuff before I move on to the ASN? So in terms of the ASL, as we've highlighted also within Appendix 2, we are anticipating that there might be increase in expenditure of around about £300,000 on ASL at the moment. However, there are some compensating areas already identified within the education budget which will help to address that this year. but the overall demand and requirements will be considered as well as part of the budget development process.
Thank you, Gillian. Does that answer your question, Councillor Scobie?
It answers the question when it puts some pressure on the developing process or the budget on next year's and settling the budget for the administration, particularly against a zero budget that we've been hearing announcements from the First Minister.
But it would sound like the situation is constantly under review, with the backup of that extra £1 million being there as effectively a safety net, but it's always constantly being reviewed. Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, I'm on exactly the same page as Willie. I'll try not to cover the same things as Willie did, but I'm looking at the theme of invest to save. And that's what we're feeling in both these situations. Social services and ASN. I've only been a councillor for a year and a half or so, and I'm on the Social Works Committee and Education Committee. These are issues that we're being reactive instead of proactive. Education, I've already used their contingency plan for ASN, so there's nothing less in their contingency plan. My ask is that, and I'm very, very aware that there's reviews ongoing at the moment in both social service and ASN, and I know through the education one that's doing a lot of good work. My plea is that we, as Willie has mentioned, we need to be more proactive than reactive. These are issues that are just getting worse. ASN is getting worse every year. If you look at the budget, it increases every year, and we have to go to a contingency to react rather than be proactive. If we're not proactive in both social care and in education, we pay the price in later years. So I'm very well aware of the prudence that is required within this budget, but these are issues that are going to cause us financial pain for years to come. And that doesn't get into the sort of moral obligation of these people need help. Social services, they're short of staff. So if they get more staff, the budget rises. So that puts more pressure on them. So it's only fair for me that the officials have the resources to be proactive and not reactive. And I feel it very, very strongly. On education and in social service, the word mitigation is used a lot, far too often. Mitigation is short term. It's reacting to the immediate. It does nothing for the future. We must be thinking of how we manage the current and what we do in the future. So my plea is that both of these services, on the back of the reviews that are ongoing, we understand the need to be proactive, and that will reduce the costs we have in future, and it will address our key priorities of cost of living crisis and also closing the attainment gap in schools. So my question is, can we react to these reviews in a positive manner so that it's not hand to mouth year on year, that the officials get a chance to plan for the long term of both these crucial services?
Paul, would you like to come back in on that one?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, because certainly part of our ongoing discussions with both social work and education colleagues are on the opportunities for greater investment in early intervention and prevention to avoid greater increases further down the line. This is obviously an issue that's prevalent across Scotland at the moment. One of the challenges for council has been the lack or absence of funding available to councils to support early intervention and prevention measures. However, this council is in a position whereby, as previously reported, we do have some non-recurring resources available to us, so we do have the opportunity here to invest in those type of measures, and I know particularly within social work but also education as well, looking at measures that can actually have an impact at an earlier stage to avoid things becoming more difficult is a big part of what they're looking at the minute. The intensive family support service that members previously invested in and was viewed as being successful, and certainly initially we saw some real benefits in that in terms of reducing the cost of external residential placements. That's the kind of thing that we're looking towards. Myself and Gillian met with, as she said, colleagues in social work last week to discuss some of these. So part of the work we're doing at the minute, and we'll bring forward to members during the budget process, will be to specifically look for opportunities for investment in early intervention and prevention.
Thank you, Paul. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Jameson?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It does satisfy me. We'll have to see this going forward. I think it should be a high priority with the council, because with all due respect, we need to be prudent. We have to be prudent, and often it's Rob and Peter to play Paul, but we need to be very cognizant of the investment now for the future. And that's, we've also, I'd just like to mention, at the full council, I think it was a full council, we talked about setting up an anti-poverty subgroup. This is closely linked with the poverty situation, so it's how the services can work together effectively to reduce the poverty and the impact of poverty, and ASN social services are clearly a big part of that. And for the economy of the region as well, it's so important that we've got less children coming through, and their families have got difficulty supporting these children. If we're going to grow our economy, we need these. We can't waste any children. We need to do the best for them. So I think all these things are interlinked. The poverty subcommittee, the social works, education, and the economy and resources are all very inextricably linked. And I think we need to manage the present but look to the future. I think that's incredibly important, that we don't get bogged down in the present and forget about the future. But I'm pleased to hear that work's going on, and I'm fully aware of that it is, and you all share the same concerns. So thank you.
Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. It's really to offer an apology to yourself on item 2, declarations of interest. I don't have a declaration of interest, but I should. It was remiss of me not to put my statement of connection in regards to the ongoing pay awards negotiation as COSLA Resources spokesperson. So I just wanted that noted for the minute. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I was looking at the agreed savings on page 23, and the agreed budget savings of 2.397 million, and it's anticipated that we'll get to 93% of the savings delivered by the end of the financial year. However, that's a shortfall, which is referenced in 4.27 paragraph below, of 180k coming out of the change fund. Now, that's not a savings in the true sense of being a savings, because we're taking it out of a pot that's sitting there. I'm just wondering how much of the 2.397 is actually true savings and not just being shuffled about from various pots, just to get to that 93%. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It does say at 4.26 that it's anticipated, and obviously we would maybe need to get to the end of the financial year before we have a full appreciation of where we're actually going to be. But I don't know if Gillian wants to come in also on that point as well.
Yes, thank you. Just to confirm, the 2.397 is the total agreed savings this year. The 180 reflects to a time and delay in terms of the delivery of that aspect. So what we're expecting is that we will deliver 2.217 of the full 2.397 that's been approved this financial year. That's our forecast, and that'll be a time and delay, so the full aspect will be delivered in full from the 1st of April. It's just that because some of them are associated with properties and various aspects like that, it's sometimes part way through the year before you actually achieve the savings, so we have little shortfalls in terms of the delivery.
Grand. Thank you, Gillian. Councillor Dorwood.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Thank you for the report, which is extremely comprehensive and covers a lot of areas. Can I draw your attention initially to page 20, 4.3 to 4.7, pay award negotiations, and 4.7 just read it out. The ongoing pay negotiations therefore continue to represent a very significant risk to the Council's overall financial position in both the current year and subsequent years. I appreciate the paper was written before the pay negotiations in COSLA on the 3rd of November, when COSLA announced that the Scottish Government had identified a mechanism to underwrite limited additional one-off funding of 17.2 million, which can meet the justified, I would suggest, extra demands of the trade union sides that all elements of the current pay offer are rightly and properly backdated, and as importantly, a commitment to look at a £15 underpinning rate for low-paid council workers is addressed. But this mechanism, and I'll say that in quotes, this mechanism requires council to provide monies to Scottish Government. Scottish Government have agreed to pay this money back next year, but what concerns me is that we need an absolute commitment that it's paid back in full, and we don't have that yet. And this, to me, actually flies in the face of the Verity House Agreement, but we'll leave that there. So can I ask, from a perspective of this council and this council's share of that monies, that the chair of this committee and our leader and the council lobbies Scottish Government actively to ensure that these monies that we are giving to Scottish Government to fund a deserved pay rise, I'm not arguing with the pay rise for our lowest paid staff at all, but that is paid back in full at the next budget. It'll be interesting to see how that's managed, given there's going to be a budget deficit for Scottish Government, but I think we need to do that. I would ask that that's done, and hopefully that this committee agrees with that. And there's a very small mention, if I can, for a second, request at 4.25 of council tax freeze. Whilst the Labour Group broadly supports measures that help reduce people's bills, again, this proposal must be backed with a commitment from Scottish Government to fund the proposed 6.5 council tax increase in this council to the last penny. They have said they would refund, but it has to be to the last penny. Because if it's not funded, many of the services the poorest people in this region use will be the ones that are cut by this council. So again, can I ask that the chair of this committee and the leader of this administration, via DG Council and via COSLA, lobby Scottish Government to fund that council tax freeze in full. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. I would expect that's the least we can do to lobby for the full amount to be repaid back to us. Paul, do you want to come in on that at all?
Just really to confirm that through the COSLA leaders, obviously councils are seeking to secure full compensation, full funding for the impact of the council tax freeze. Councils have indicated that on an indicative basis that they were looking at increases of between 5 and 8% for next year. Obviously, we previously announced an indicative council tax increase of 6.5%, as Councillor Dorward said, although obviously that would have been part of further consideration as part of the budget process. So obviously, where the Scottish Government identify the funding to provide full support is one of the concerns that local authorities have at the minute, because I think it isn't apparent where that money will come from, and whether it's an earmarking of funding that may have come our way rather than additional funding is one of the concerns. And obviously the motion, or the approach that leaders are taking, is to look not just at the funding of the council tax freeze, but to look at that in the context of the overall funding settlement coming to councils. What's the underlying movement, what's the additional funding for pay that you referred to there, and what's the funding for the impact of the council tax freeze. So this is absolutely something that is being looked at a national level to try and ensure that councils get compensation for that impact.
Thank you, Paul. At least that gives us some level of reassurance. Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for lateness. Yeah, I'm not going to rehearse what Paul's just said. Totally agree with him, and totally agree with Councillor Dorward. And I'll assure you that I'll robustly lobby on behalf of the council to make sure that shortfall is reimbursed for the 17.2 million, or our share of the 17.2. And the council tax, obviously, we'll need to see the detail of what the government believes the shortfall will be and what local government believes the shortfall will be, and we'll ensure again that lobbying is robust to make sure that we don't miss out on the additional income that council tax could have raised for our council. So be assured of that, Councillor Dorward. I'll do whatever I can.
Grand, thank you, Councillor McGregor. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. No, and absolutely, I think we should always seek as a council to get the funding that we need to run our services, and whether that's through council tax or reimbursement of council tax, whatever that is. I'm just wondering though, we've set a one-year budget where we have council tax this year, we've got an indicative budget, there were certainly a couple of budgets had indicative 3-year budgets, etc. going forward. 6.5 was the figure, I think, which was agreed at full council. Is that the right level? I mean, do all the groups across the council agree that that would be the level of council tax we should be setting? in order to make that claim to recover that amount from the Scottish Government. Because obviously, if that's where it's going to go, that's the reimbursement that we would expect to lobby for. So I think if that's our position, because we haven't agreed the budget yet, if you see what I mean, for next year. So are we saying that in the Chamber we think 6.5% is the right level of council tax to be set in order to claim that back?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm not sure if it was a question for myself. I mean, all I can confirm is that members did agree on an indicative basis a 6.5% increase for next year as part of the budget that was agreed in February this year. Obviously, as is always the case, members consider the council tax for the year ahead as part of the budget process, so that would have been revisited. But certainly the 6.5% is what was previously announced as an indicative increase for next year.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, just briefly. Yeah, so I think it is really for yourself, Paul, because ultimately it would be this council would have a position on which to base any lobbying. So I think presumably the agreement would be indicatively, at least from what the conversation is today, that the 6.5% is the settled indicative figure of this council to take to negotiating with through COSLA to ask for that amount to be paid. And obviously that'll happen at a COSLA level, but as long as we're clear on what our council's lobbying position is, I think that's really what I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is how we would take that one forward. Yep. Excellent. If there are no further questions, let's move this to the recommendations. Unless Councillor Hagman, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, clearly I have put in a statement of connection, so I'm not going to speak to the detail. However, I just wanted to make the committee aware that a letter from the Deputy First Minister was circulated to all leaders, to the Chief Executive and all political leaders, confirming the 17.2 million would be repaid. So without going into the detail, that confirmation has been sought from Scottish Government. So we don't need to lobby on that aspect, but appreciate that there's a wider debate around the financial sustainability of council services. Thank you.
Grant. Thank you, Councillor Hagman. So we'll move to recommendations. 1. We note the update in relation to the ongoing pay award negotiations, an approach to addressing the potential funding shortfall for 2023-2024, as detailed in paragraph 4.6. 2. Note the forecast service outrun positions against agreed budgets provided in Appendix 1. 3. Agree the allocation of unallocated budget pressures funding of 197k to support the implementation of the Scottish recommended allowance for foster carers and kinship carers as detailed in Appendix 2. 4. Note the 1.295 million of recurring budget pressures funding remains available to support further pressures, including those set out in Appendix 2. And finally, 5. Note the progress against delivery of agreed savings reflected within the 2023-2024 budget as provided in Appendix 3. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, happy to go with that. And it was just to embed that action. I think we were sort of looking to get an updated spreadsheet of the savings. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that...
Reserve, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Item number 5, Finance and Procurement Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2023-24 for the period ended 30th September 23. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. Members are presented with the Quarter 2 performance against budget for the Finance and Procurement Service. Gillian Ross and Paul Garrett are here today to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor for questions. I don't see any hands being raised. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually really just trying to, a bit of reminding of what the problem is. It's page 37, 4.2, the challenges in the pay and employment services. What actually are the problems with that particular part of the service?
Paul, would you like to come in on that question?
Yes, this relates to an increase in the level or amount or volume of recruitment that's been undertaken by the council recently. We saw a real spike in recruitment activity during the COVID period because of the kind of movement in posts. We had anticipated that would fall back once things got back to normal. That hasn't been the case. We are still seeing very high levels of recruitment, so that's putting pressures on the team. But there is a recruitment review process underway. Finance, HR and colleagues from services to look at that and how that could be improved going forward. But it's still a pressure on the service at the moment.
Thank you, Paul. Does that answer your question, Councillor Johnston?
Yes, it does. And I was actually, after previous meetings, I was expecting it to have improved, and you've explained why it hasn't, and that's fine.
Grant, do we have any further questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is actually a question on the report templates. So obviously we're moving towards new report templates, and sections 5 and 6 obviously link these to the council plan. So section 5 does that. Section 6 talks about the implications and risks, and headlines the four. Well, what I'm getting to is, if we look through, and this is just a meta question on report writing probably, but all of the different reports in here present this in a different way. So I'm just thinking, do we have a template yet? And it's maybe one for Nick and the Business Bureau to pick up on. But when we look at sections 5 and 6 throughout the thing, you'll find that there's different. It's done differently, and I just wondered if we're going to go for a consistent template or if it's going to be different every time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Nick, have we any set format we wish to use going forward with these?
Yes, there is an agreed template. I think it's fair to say it's still bedding in, because you'll see some minor differences on the way some reports are presented, but yes, there is an agreed template that officers should be using, yeah.
If we have no further questions, we'll move to recommendations. Members were asked to note that based on the position as of the end of September 23, Finance and Procurement is forecast to contain expenditure within the available resources by the end of the financial year, as detailed in Appendix 1. Noted. Item number 6. Fees and Charges, Framework and Principles, Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. Members are presented with an overview of work to be progressed in relation to reviewing the Council's approach to setting fees and charges as part of the Change and Savings Programme development. This report seeks members' consideration of the overarching principles to be followed as part of this review process, and highlights the consideration of these by the budget panel. Paul Garrett is here to assist in members' questions. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I do get the key principles on page 46. My only concern really is about the pass-through energy costs. For example, if I was to berth a boat in a harbour somewhere and then plug into the electricity, those pass-through costs, you would expect, you would have an annual fee, for example, and those should be included. So it's a wee bit concerned that, that halfway through the term or the year, that, your charges can go up. Equally, if I had an annual pass, for the DG1, for example, going swimming, things like that, if the heating of the water increases, the energy cost increases and things like that, we do sort of like go halfway through the year and then just bump up the annual pass. It's just a concern that I'd like to, that we consider that, that we're being consistent when it comes to, fees and charges, basically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Paul, anything to add to that?
Yep, we specifically pulled out pass-through energy costs in the report because we're aware they have been treated a bit differently to other fees and charges. But I think the principle there is that it's not so much a charge for the provision of a council service. We're effectively providing access to a power source where that's happening. So really all that's being done there is that the fees and charges reflect the cost of providing that power. So there is exceptions made in relation to pass-through energy costs. But again, that's something we'll look to firm up as part of this review.
Could I come back in, Chair? Yeah, I do take your point, Paul, but, you know, if we've got people berthing in a harbour somewhere, you know, we need to be, you know, communicating to people that potentially charges could go up, and hopefully at some stage they might even go down.
Paul, do you want to come in once again?
Just say, fully agree that effective communication of any movement in charges is absolutely crucial as part of this, and that's something again that we'll look to firm up further and get a more consistent approach as part of this review.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. No, I fully agree with that. There's probably a bit of communication work to do so that people are fully aware what's a pass-through thing and what's a fee. Just on that though, it might not only be energy. I mean, that's the obvious one for EV charging points or harbours or whatever, but it could be that, you know, it's that kind of, we don't yet know what we don't yet know. It could be that water, you know, who knows what will happen in the future, but there might be other things that we effectively pass through on top of services. So let's not close that down as part of the principles we're setting here. And similarly, at the top of page 47, it does talk about a schedule of fees and charges in a format determined, etc. But I think part of the other thing would be there'll be times when we choose to subsidise for various reasons, particular services for good reason. And I think it's key because we've seen before where service level agreements seem to get lost in the mist of time depending on departmental changes and all the rest of it, or staff moving on. And there's been no central register, if you like, in the same way as now we've got a contract register, which is very welcomed. I think we probably have to have sight of where there's been local arrangements or service level agreements, potentially either for corporate services or local services, so we know what decisions we've taken to subsidise particular fees for good reason, just so that we're not caught off guard whenever we find there's legacy arrangements like little wee time bombs, you know, that spring up. In the next council term, when we're long gone, there'll be future ones going, when did they agree that? And there's no central register. So that would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Paul, can you add to that?
Yeah, no, happy to support that. I think in terms of both the key points, a big part of this exercise, and just to say it's already been very well progressed, and I think we're not that far away from being there, is pulling together that overall register of existing fees and charges and making sure that it's there and comprehensive and available to members. So as I say, that work is well progressed. And the other point, it's very much in line with the approach reflected in the report in terms of we're setting a framework here, some guidance in terms of future fees and charges considerations, but there is always discretion for member consideration of whether a particular subsidy should apply. And if I look down the bulleted key principles at paragraph 4.5, most of them kind of end off with, you know, unless there's a specific reason or formal agreement otherwise. So that's recognising that member consideration of this and exceptions has to be a part of this going forward.
Satisfied, Councillor Thompson?
Never satisfied, but it'll do for now. Thank you.
That'll do me. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I'm looking at this in terms of, you know, it is about the principles, but looking at 4.4, the key objectives for the current review are to identify opportunities to generate additional income. And then I look further down and look at fees and charges should be set at a level that will fully cover the costs of the provision of the relevant services, including overheads and the cost of the capital, unless otherwise determined. I'm looking at these opportunities and perhaps what we've missed over the years in terms of generating the funding. And I can think of one in terms of advertising, you know, in putting out there, you know, we've got vans going around, we've got roundabouts and so forth and so on. Is this an opportunity? But the elephant in the room, you know, and it's a topic of discussion just now, is parking on our streets, decriminalisation of parking, and also car parking charges. And there are people in the community that believe there's a fortune to be made. But if we're applying the fees and charges to some of these, particularly car parking charges and decriminalisation, it may not be such a fortune. And there are other authorities who have gone that way. Indeed, the borders decriminalised, but did not go for the car parking charges. So what are these opportunities that are identified in any review, and have they been fully costed in terms of what the effect would be on this council?
Paul?
Thanks, Chair. What this report's seeking to set out is the approach that we're taking to identify and provide opportunities to members for their consideration. There's nothing in terms of agreeing these principles that will tie members into anything going forward, but a key part of the budget process is to try and identify opportunities for members' consideration, and once those opportunities are identified, it'll be up to members to determine what they want to introduce as part of the budget process and ongoing service development. So, as I say, we will try through this exercise to identify those opportunities, but it'll be up to subsequent member decisions in terms of where charges go, and also including where we may or may not wish to introduce charges for services that are not charged for at the minute. So this will all come back to members for their decisions once this work's been undertaken.
You happy with that, Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, and I look forward to, if there are opportunities that we've been missing over the years, that'll be, something to look forward to in terms of what are the opportunities.
It sounds very much like that Paul's saying that members will have a role to play within that decision making as to what is charged and for what. So it will come back to us at some point. Councillor Dorward.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, and it's welcome that we are reviewing this now, given that we initiated the process in 2018-19. I appreciate COVID came along and challenged that, but COVID's in the past now, although some of the effects of it are still with us. Turning to the key principles, in the second bullet point in terms of discretionary services, Council should seek to maximise income through fees and charges. Don't have an issue with that in principle, but that's looking at our arts, our culture, our leisure and our sport, amongst other things, services. And what I wouldn't want, and it's just to make a point, is that our disadvantaged, our poorest in society, are deprived from accessing these services. Most of them are actually, quite a lot of our museums and things are free at the point of charge at the moment, which is good, because these services in general, I would say, improve public health, and that's something we need to do as a council, and close health inequalities for the poorest in society. And as we know, 1 in 4 of our children in Dumfries and Galloway are in poverty. So I would make a plea that when we're doing this, and it's to sort of follow on from what Councillor Thompson and Councillor Scobie have said, that we look at each one individually and ensure that accessibility to these discretionary services is universal. However we manage that, because that actually assists those from the disadvantaged areas in Dumfries and Galloway to access these services, which a lot of them don't at the moment. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. Paul, would you like to come in there?
Again, I think that's consistent with the approach reflected in the report in terms of the principles and identifying opportunities for members to consider where and to what extent they wish to apply charges. I think one of the things that we would want to develop through this is trying to give members better information on the degree of subsidy applied, where you are providing services at less than cost, having an understanding of the subsidy attached to that and the cost and the benefit that we're getting in terms of wider objectives through it. So again, that's part of this exercise, but I think everything Councillor Dorward said is very much in line with the principles reflected in this report.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very much agree with previous speakers. I think impact assessment and how the fees and charges impact in different areas is absolutely vital. Members should be the ones that make the decisions, and the principles are absolutely fine in principle. But there will be instances where members do wish to subsidise, and I think having that register of what we are subsidising and at what level would be really, really helpful. And then communication with the public. And I'll give you one example. Through the principle of full cost recovery and the annual uplift from the 1st of April, having invested heavily in EV infrastructure, our kilowatt charge more than doubled in one go in April. And I don't think the public were cited on that. I don't think they were informed of it. They just found out about it when they went to plug in their EV vehicle. And I think on that basis, we're looking at a just transition to net zero. We're trying to encourage people into electric vehicles and looking at climate mitigation. To more than double the price of that charge without a member decision, I think was an incorrect one. I know that the budget panel are looking at this now, and I think we just need to have some sharper processes in place around what officers determine is a good level and what we may wish to subsidise and determine ourselves. So just ensuring that that's filtered into the process.
Grand, thank you, Councillor McGregor. Do you have any further questions? No. If there are none, we'll move to the recommendations. Oh, sorry. Councillor Thompson?
Oh, you'll be sick of the sight of me already. So it was just on the back of Councillor McGregor's point, and I think it touches on Councillor Campbell's point at the start, which is really, how do we, it's about being clear about to the public about how we deal with those variable charges. So likes of EV charging points, that would effectively, I would have thought, be a pass-through cost. But it's maybe that's where the communication part comes in. So if our service users have come to expect a certain type of service, maybe we just need to communicate better that, look, we're just passing this on to you, but it's a service facility in the town, so you can recharge or whatever. Because we do create our own problems if we just subsidise something without people realising that that's actually subsidised. So it's maybe just to echo and reaffirm the points that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Without question, the appropriate information and visible information going out to constituents and residents is clearly going to probably resolve or stop a lot of our problems. Thank you. So recommendations. Number 1, note the Council's policies and approach in relation to setting fees and charges are subject to review as part of the Change and Savings Programme. 2, agree the overarching principles to be followed as part of this review process as set out in paragraph 4.5 of the report. And 3, note the steps to be followed as part of this review in order to provide members with options to consider in relation to fees and charge levels as part of the current budget process, also set out in paragraph 4.7. So note, agree and note. Item number 7. Capital Investment Strategy Monitoring 2023-24 Quarter 2 Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report presents members with an update on the 10-year capital investment strategy and an overview of the financial and physical progress of the capital programme for the current financial year. Karen Donaldson and Paul Garrett are here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do realise this is a monitoring report for quarter 2. However, I'm looking at page 51, 4.10, where it says that the only project with the red flag is the Dumfries Academy refurbishment, Lorburn Primary relocation due to the delays caused by the late Learning Estate Investment Programme Phase 3. I think that's unintentionally slightly misleading, and I don't mean to be unkind when I say that, because when I was looking back at previous education and learning reports, and in particular the 1st of February, in paragraph 3.3 in that report, it says the refurbishment works at Dumfries Academy are fully funded through the Council Capital Investment Strategy. This means that funding is not predicated on alignment with the Scottish Government's LEAP Phase 2. Now, that came to report because we were unsuccessful with the Academy and Lorburn on the LEAP 2 funding, and now we're unsuccessful again, which is a great disappointment. But the actual capital investment strategy is not predicated on LEAP funding. And it also goes on to say 3.4 in that particular report, Lorburn Primary School, as with Dumfries Academy, the funding for Lorburn Primary School is solely through the Council's capital investment strategy, and similarly is not predicated on the LEAP funding process. And even if we go on to the appendix, you can clearly see Appendix 1, there's a number of figures in that for the Dumfries Academy with 212k. Appendix 2, again, Dumfries Academy refurb Lorburn, it says that we've already spent over $500,000 and that extra 212k. So there's $750,000 that we spent. So what are we actually monitoring here? That we spent money but got nowhere because we're still waiting on the Scottish Government, for example, giving us funding when it's not predicated on that funding coming forward. It's a classic example of our capital investment programme not being taken forward, in my view. So just to sort of add to that, there's a report further on, I think it's item 10, where it clearly states in the report, the table below includes all contracts currently planned to be awarded during the financial year 23-24, and in that report you've got DLT2, Dumfries Academy refurb, and Lorburn Primary relocation, construction and planned. And just to finish off, Chair, again in March 2022, Education and Learning, the Lorburn Primary School, and it has in the appendix, the consultation mandate, prepare the proposal, consultation period, which was meant to start last year and finish by the end of December 2022, and we've still got no further forward. So I think, in my view, that people deserve answers. Why are we not carrying on with the Dumfries Academy in this vein, instead of just sort of, we'll just park it until we get LEAP funding from the Scottish Government. We didn't get it last year, we didn't get it this year. Is it going to be waiting for LEAP 4? So I honestly think that we should be, if we've got a capital investment programme, it's already funded, why aren't we just not taking it forward? And I think members of the public, parents at both schools, staff at both schools and elected members should know the reason why we're not taking this forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I personally wasn't privy to that historic report that you referred to. It is bitterly disappointing that the funding has been, our bid for funding has been unsuccessful with the Scottish Government, but I hope that Paul could come in and add a bit more meat to the bones there.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Councillor Campbell's correct that the Council, following indication that we were not successful in receiving LEAP 2 funding, agreed to reflect in the Council's capital programme funding to support refurbishment of the Academy and the relocation of Lorburn. And that's what's reflected in the capital investment strategy Appendix 1 that you referred to. But subsequent to that, when the LEAP 3 opportunity came along, members through the Education Committee, and I think it was full council, agreed to submit a bid for LEAP 3. Now that bid for LEAP 3 was a significantly different project to the one that we've agreed to fund from within existing council resources. It was an enhanced scheme to meet the LEAP 3 requirements, so it would be a much more expensive, much bigger project, and Education Committee were waiting for the results of the LEAP 3 process before progressing with that. The LEAP 3 process we had anticipated being informed towards the tail end of 2022 on that, but it was delayed a number of times, and we've just recently received indication that we have not been successful this time. So we can revert back to the previous project. If we were to go for the bigger project, obviously there'd be a significant financial implication associated with that. So my understanding is that a report on the next steps will be coming back to the Education Committee to allow members to consider that further. But just to say that it is a different project that we bid for LEAP 3 funding as agreed by full council than the one that's currently reflected in the capital investment strategy.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. that's why I mentioned that I wasn't trying to be unkind, because I do recognise that Education and Learning last year did want to take forward the Leap 3 funding process. However, through 2020, 2021, 2022, we've gave strategic direction, that we would fund the Dumfries Academy and the Lorburn relocation under the capital investment, regardless whether we get funding from elsewhere. It's a nice to have, but it's just my point of view. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at Appendix 1, and again, I'll maybe just reiterate what Councillor Campbell was just saying. I appreciate this is a monitoring report. But I'm looking at Appendix 1 on page 55, and it makes reference to Borderlands funding on the report. So there's 1.4 million allocated, 2.5 million for next year, 2.5 right up until 13.13 million. I'm just looking for a bit of detail. I appreciate that within Economy and Resources we'll get details of these projects, whether it's Chapel Cross, the Dairy Nexus, Place Plan, Seven Staines, etc. But in terms of the funding for these things, because obviously we're looking at the finances here, have we received any funding to the council, or have we? I appreciate that we've allocated funding to support these projects going forward, but have we actually received any receipt of funding coming into the council as yet? Because I'm aware that the growth deal was launched by the previous in the previous council, with Elaine Murray and Rob Davidson taking this forward and signing up to the growth deal. But I'm just looking, when are we likely to actually get some funds in to take these projects forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, would you like to come in there to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, with Borderlands, the amount that's stated in Appendix 1 is basically the Council's contribution over the 10 years to the overall programme. Obviously, we've got the confirmation that we've been awarded the funding over the 10 years. However, as the projects are all at quite an early stage, they're still going through their sort of outline and full business case procedures. There's a number of projects due to go through the Borderlands Partnership Board in December, which is primarily for some of the Scottish Borders projects that the Council will be accountable body for, but we're anticipating our first project to go through will probably be Stranraer Marina at some point, maybe the middle of next year. So, I mean, the projects are progressing. They're all sort of getting their full business cases are in development. It's just sort of getting the time and getting all the sort of checks and sign off done. And obviously, the reports on the specific projects go through Economy and Resources Committee at the appropriate points.
Thank you, Karen. I think Lorna wishes to come in.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Hagman. The drawdown of Borderlands money is in reimbursement of costs we incur as we deliver projects. So once we move into construction phase on any projects for the council and the council's delivery of those projects, then we'll be drawing down the costs and through a role separately, which Karen has described as accountable body. For that, you'll recall through ENR committee, the SCAMP project in Stranraer has been approved as part of the Natural Capital Programme. The Stranraer Marina we expect to bring forward to members next year, and there's a full report as part of the Economic Development Asset Class on each of the projects. There are a number of projects that are in Dumfries and Galloway that are not led by the council but supported by the council. The first project, which we anticipate subject to Scottish Government approval and then Borderlands Partnership Board approval, is the Dairy Nexus project, and that's due to be considered at final business case at the Partnership Board in December. So our expectation is Scottish Government will be able to confirm and allow that plan, that business case to now move forward, which will allow drawdown and delivery of that project. So it is about the 10-year programme. The use of the money in Borderlands isn't in a flat fashion. It's not been allocated on an annual basis. And there is a definite peak towards the middle of the deal in terms of drawdown of cash. So it is about us working with that across all of the projects as well. So a number of projects are in delivery, but as I said, the ENR committee receives a full update on that, and that's included in the papers that were issued on Friday.
Right, thank you, Lorna. Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Hagman?
In part, Chair, yes. I appreciate that all the individual projects are progressing at different paces and full business plans need to go through. Obviously, we've had quite a few of those to ENR, but it's really the sort of financial side that I'm looking at in terms of how much have we put in, when are we expecting the overall financial risk, I guess, to the council and what we're actually expecting. I appreciate it's been quite a while since the Borderlands Growth Deal was signed, and it might be quite useful just to get a one-page document just to update members of this is what we're anticipating. I don't know if that would be appropriate, but it's just, as I say, in terms of that financial output, because obviously we have made those commitments and as yet we've not seen what's coming back, and just whether there's an update to the actual finances of it. I appreciate, as I say, some of this will sit within ENR, but it's that overall package of Borderlands rather than individual projects so that we can utilise their best use of funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, do you want to come back in there?
Happy to share that with elected members. It's public documents available for the Borderlands Partnership Board, which not only includes project updates but also financial projections in terms of drawdown of monies across both the UK Government and Scottish Government side of the deal. So happy to provide that to all members and obviously provide the link that's accessible any time as updated on a quarterly basis. But we will take that on board in terms of future capital reporting, and that was already a commitment agreed with members as we start to draw down monies as part of the accountable body role anyway as part of capital investment strategy. So we'll take those points on board.
Grand, thank you, Lorna. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 50, it's 4.8, and it's the table one unallocated, capital fund balance. The second point to that, it talks about we've agreed that I think it's up to £1.8 million in regards to Beatty School, it's a roof in particular. My understanding is that contract's been awarded. I don't know if we've got any information today or can pick it up offline, but looking for, has that been awarded? We thought that 1.8 was an overestimation at the time at full council, if I remember correctly. I just wonder, has that been awarded to whoever the right person is? And if so, what did it come in at? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I have to admit, I don't have those details to hand, but happy to try and get those and provide those to Councillor Carruthers.
Excellent. We shall get those for you, Councillor Carruthers. Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yes, I could have come back on the remarks made in terms of the Borderlands meeting to take place on the 5th, in December, and ask if the £15 million that was allocated or indicated as part of the place plan being shared amongst the 5 participating towns. Is this going to be submitted to the December meeting? Because we've had a number of place plans submitted. And also, just to remind that the Borderlands deal, growth deal, the marina was scheduled to start in 2025. So is that still on schedule to start in 2025 and that all procedures will have been followed and agreed? For 2025, and then we've got the outstanding £6 million that was indicated by the then Deputy First Minister John Swinney that would come to Stranraer. Does anyone know just what the position is with that £6 million that was indicated by John Swinney as the then Deputy First Minister?
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. Slightly off tack for this agenda item. I think maybe Lorna can address the first question. As far as the £6 million, I'm not sure if Paul can come in on that. Lorna, do you want to start?
So there's a full report at ENR committee on these matters, an update, Billy, but just as a bridgement to this report, Borderlands Place programme money is available. It's indicated, but it's dependent on investment projects coming forward as a result of the place plans. There's no firm allocation split between the 5 places. It's a matter of those investable plans coming forward for government consideration. So we have 2 place plans approved through Council, both for Stranraer and Kelham-Kirkconnell, 3 further to come. It's not about being first in the queue, it's about those then having been approved, and they have both been approved through Partnership Board, bringing forward investable projects that could secure borderlands investment. So just to clarify that, and that was in the full report on place plans for borderlands that was considered by full council in the last council. Stranraer Marina continues to make progress, and there's a full update in the ENR committee around timelines. In relation to the £6 million that was offered by Scottish Government some time ago to support Stranraer waterfront developments, and we're currently in discussion with the Scottish Government Civil Servants to clarify with them the process in which the local community and projects could access that £6 million, given the development of the place plan was one of the things that was predicated by government in terms of similar to borderlands investable projects. So we are making progress around that, and we'll continue to provide members with updates once we're informed of that.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Scobie?
It may have been offline, Chair. I'm grateful for the clarification and gives us some encouragement there.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Marshall.
No, it's okay now, Chair. I'll put my hand out.
Grand, thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll move to the recommendations. 1. To note the financial and physical progress against the 2023-24 capital programme for the quarter ending 30th September 23, as detailed in appendices 2, 3 and 4. 2. Agree acceleration of up to 1.5 million in relation to the school's asset class, as detailed in paragraphs 4.4 and 4.5. And 3. Note the current prudential indicators based on the 30th September 23 monitoring position, as detailed in Appendix 5. So we're noting, agreeing and noting. Item number 8. Reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete education estate. Report by the Head of Economy and Development. Members are asked to approve funding of £500,000 for initial remedial works to reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete or RAC panels identified within the school estate. Paul McCulloch is here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor to questions. It appears you're getting off lightly, Paul. No, Councillor Dorward.
No issues with the proposals in terms of addressing the challenges with RAC in our schools. That's right and proper. But given this is FPT, do we have any movement from Scottish Government in terms of reimbursing the funding that we're spending on doing this? Thank you.
Paul, could you come in there?
Not at this.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was looking at the other Paul. Sorry, Paul. On you go.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So there have been discussions at Scottish Heads of Property Group regarding recompense for RAC-related work, but there is no government funding identified so far. There are some local authorities that have spent on RAC removal already, and obviously we're anticipating that will continue as this programme goes forward. But at this stage, no government money. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. And the other Paul would like to come in.
Just to say that the Scottish Government have indicated that to date they have received no additional UK Government funding. Obviously this is a UK-wide issue, and that costs in England so far have been met through schools' own funding. So I think the Scottish Government position is that they're waiting to see whether there's any additional funding provided at a UK level, which then feeds through Barnett consequentials to Scotland. I think I'm right in saying that COSLA leaders agreed last month to write to the UK Government to seek support for these costs. I haven't heard whether there's been any response in relation to that yet, but certainly this is something that's been looked at a national level with that letter or that approach being made to the UK Government on this.
Grand, thank you, Paul. Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Chair. I note on page 55 at 2.4, the 500k is identified for initial remedial works. I'm wondering if there's any expectation that there'll be a degree of expense beyond the remedial works. I'm also, and I'm quite sure this is the case, that while the Education Directorate are doing a very extensive review on the Dumfries and Galloway school estate, how much consideration is being given to the school estate in the next generations. In particular, the 4 schools you've mentioned include, one of which includes Dumfries Academy. So it's how are we relating the expense, the remedial expense to these schools? Is there any expected additional costs? And if so, a sort of estimate on how big that is? And also looking forward at a modernisation of the entire school estate. Are all these things being kept in the discussion?
Paul, can you come in at all there?
Yeah, thank you. So within the paper, this initial ask is for 500k to address the initial remedial works required. We go on to talk about the need for a rack removal programme longer term. So it's quite clear that we can't have rack within the estate over the longer period. This initial work will address issues that we've got currently, but the intention is to come back with fully costed proposals for removal of all rack within our estate, both within the schools and within the other building that we've identified at Annan Swimming Pool. We don't yet have those costs. Those are being worked up at the moment. And once we have clarity on how much that's going to be, we'll sit down and work through that with finance colleagues to see how that can be afforded. And it may be over 2 or 3 separate financial years. With regards to the second issue around, schools and futures for buildings, obviously the rack within the Dumfries Academy building is within the tower block that was earmarked for demolition as part of development proposals. We've heard previous discussions at committee today regarding the Dumfries Academy proposals, and obviously, those will be factored in to decisions taken going forward.
Thank you, Paul. Having read the report, I don't have a great knowledge about aerated concrete, but it suggested to me that in some of the schools, the concrete is in a better state than others, so you could then prioritise and schedule a list of what needs done most quickly. So it's not going to be a huge expense all at once. You can schedule and prioritise what needs done first.
Thanks, Chair, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Grand. Do we have any further questions? No, we'll move to recommendations.
Chair, I've got my hand up.
Where are we? Oh, sorry, Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, it was just, and I mentioned it earlier, and I just wonder if it's an issue of timing, because obviously E&R, there's a report up, report 20, and it's kind of confirming that of the non-school estate the council are responsible for, the only building seems to be Annan Swimming Pool. So I'm just wondering why this wasn't included in this report, because if it's the only other building that requires that, I thought it might have been accommodated within, because it means coming back here again potentially for whatever costs are required for Annan Swimming Pool if it's the only other building.
Can you answer that one, Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is simply a timing issue. So obviously, in terms of reports being written and asks being made, there's been a further find of rack within the Annan Swimming Pool. We've managed to reflect that within the Economy and Resources paper, and we've explained how we'll deal with that as well. So I fully anticipate having to come back to this committee to ask for additional funding, and that's been reflected in this paper.
Thank you.
Grand. If there's no further questions, we'll move to recommendations. 1, to note the findings of the reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete panel inspections completed to date and the need for investment and ongoing monitoring. 2, note the work that is underway at both Laurie Now Primary School and Carrotherstown Primary School. 3. Note the works planned for both Gatehouse Primary and Dumfries Academy. And lastly, 4. Agree additional funding of 500k for initial remediation works within the school estates to be funded from within the loan charges interest on revenue balances for 2023-24 underspend, separately reported on this agenda. Item number 9. The Treasury Management Mid-Year Review 2023-24 report by Head of Finance and Procurement. The Mid-Year Treasury Management Review of activities during 23-24 is presented for our information in line with the requirements of the CIPFA Code of Practice and includes the Prudential and Treasury Management Indicators. Karen Donaldson and Paul Garrett are here to assist with members' questions. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Just Councillor Hislop's not here, so I felt somebody ought to step in to ask a question. So just on page 78, I think it is, we've got the breaches counterparty limits. I'm apologies if this is a recollection issue, but I'm sure, did we not vary this to 20 million previously in the past? But I appreciate we have changed our bank account, so I just sort of wondered, what's our current limit? Because I thought we had increased it, maybe it was just temporarily. So that was one question. The other one was on, I think it's page 81, where it talks about investments, and it mentions the non-treasury investments at Subhub Co and Heston House, and it gives figures there, but it gives no term. So I'm sort of curious as to is there any more information we have on these two particular investments? Because I don't think I was particularly fully cited on them. It'd be handy to know the term of those as well. And I think the third one is just curiosity really, but in the glossary at the end, it talks about the abbreviations and definitions, and a CPI is a standard for countries in the EU. I just sort of wondered, do we have our own version of that now going forward, and what's the intention with that? Thank you.
Karen, would you like to come in there?
Thank you. Yes, I'll start with the first point of your question regarding the limits. Your recollection's correct. We increased the counterparty limit for our main banking provider to 25 million back in 2020, and it's £10 million for all others. And the reason we had the breaches was from the 1st of April when we agreed the Treasury strategy. Our sort of key banking partner was Royal Bank of Scotland. So Royal Bank of Scotland, so they've got the £25 million limit, and our old provider, Bank of Scotland, had 10 million. So it was from the 1st of April, that's what we were operating within. But obviously, just with the switchover, there was amounts were paid into our old account that we weren't aware of, so then it was picked up the following morning as part of the cash flow processes. But obviously now we're at the position now where all bar one of our old accounts are now closed and we're fully operational with Royal Bank of Scotland. So it was just sort of because of the transitional arrangements. But you're absolutely correct, there is the two amounts, and it was never out with the overall counterparty limit. It was just that one limit with the Bank of Scotland because it had been reduced. Okay. The second part of your question about the Hubco and the Heston House loans, the Hubco loans was over 20 years as in line with the Dalbeattie DBFM contract, and I think Heston House was over 15 years. So just to give you a wee bit of context on that.
Just on that, I think with the sort of shorter term ones above, it gives you the term as in 14th August 23, September 23, isn't presumably that's the end of the term. Yes. Do we have the end of terms for those two as well? I think that's what I'm asking for.
Not off the top of my head, but I can get that to you, no problem, and include it in future reports. Thank you. And then, sorry, your final question was around the CPI. Yeah.
I think it was
yeah, that's correct.
Just to say on the CPI, I appreciate that. We probably haven't just picked up that reference to the EU there. Obviously, the CPI is the kind of standard approach to reflecting inflation in the UK. as well. So I think probably the point there is we need to update the glossary, and we'll do that for the next report.
Grand, thank you, Paul. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to page 80, Paul, I note that we've got Birmingham City Council with a £5 million loan. Is there any risk involved in that, given their financial situation? And is that something that we're factoring in when we're dealing with specific councils? Because, you know, there may be other councils that could end up in financial difficulties as well.
You can come in there, Paul.
Yeah, no, happy that. Chair, yes, there's no risk associated with that investment. They still have the same status as other local authorities, which are ultimately backed up by the UK government. So there's no specific risk there, and that investment is very much in line with the Treasury Management Strategy that was agreed with members in March this year. So no, appreciate the point given the recent reports regarding Birmingham, but they're still fully underwritten, so there's no risk for the council in terms of making that investment.
Perfect, thank you.
Grand. Do we have any further questions? No, we'll move to recommendations. Members were asked to note the details of the Treasury Management activities for the period of the 1st of April 23 to the 30th of September 23, as detailed in Appendix 1. Noted. Item number 10, Procurement and Commissioning Performance Update, Financial Year 23-24, Quarter 1, 1st of April 23 to 30th June 23. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. Members are provided with an overview of procurement activities during the first quarter of 23-24. For our consideration of overall procurement performance against a range of indicators and highlight significant achievements and challenges in the reporting period. Karen Scott and Paul Garrett are here to assist with members' questions. I'll open the floor for questions. Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just say this is an actually good report with plenty of detail. But can I make reference to page 116, local supplier spends? I had a quick count, there's 134 local suppliers, but the one that kind of sticks out to me, there's only 6 large companies. And I think it's time the council, maybe through SOSI, are trying to bring more business into the area. I know it could be hard, but when you see we've only 6 large companies, it's quite frightening for the size of Dumfries and Galloway.
Oh, Karen, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Sitt. Again, I think this is some of the work that we're doing in terms of the business development support work and looking at the opportunities. And actually, just this afternoon, we'll be working on a facilitated session with economic development colleagues around how we support development of our local businesses for the just transition and the opportunities that brings. Again, some of the feedback we're getting through some of the events and discussions we're having at the moment in the local supply bases, often some of them don't want to expand to that large size. However, completely agreeing with the sentiments that you raise in terms of the aspirations to have more larger companies based within the region.
Councillor Stitt?
That's fine, thanks, Carl.
Grand. We have Councillor McGregor. No, maybe we don't. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, on page 97, when we're talking about the social impacts, and over the page we have the graph which says the community benefits committed. However, the community benefits delivered. Now, I've raised this before at a seminar. You know, just where are we in terms of that? Because I mean, you could commit to something but still deliver nothing. So it's a wee bit of concern that you know, if we're awarding you know, contracts out, that you know, the suppliers actually do commit to what they actually say that they do. And the other, or the second point, is on page 101, where it says about the ELC framework. There's no figures in there. I'm just wondering why that was omitted. Thanks, Chair.
Could you provide a wee bit extra detail, Karen, on the commitments there?
Yeah, In relation to the second question first, and for the ELC figures, the reason they've been omitted is the overall ceiling value applied to that framework has been previously reported. So this was adding an additional supplier and ELC provision on, but the overall monetary value has already been reported in an earlier version where the original framework was set up. In relation to the question around community benefits being delivered, you may recall we've spent a lot of time getting the process right to get the commitments and to try and maximise those commitments. The delivery monitoring is something that's been evolving behind that. So what we should start to see over time is that the delivery starts to match the levels of commitments that are being made, just as that process matures. So I absolutely agree with it, again, with the statement there.
Thanks, Chair.
Grand. We have Councillor Jameson.
Caught me in the hope there. Yeah, the page I'm looking at just now is page 93, and it's part of the benefits, the education and learning, and it talks about provision of work experience placements and apprenticeships through community benefits and contracts. And it's similar to John Campbell's in a way, and also to Councillor Stitt's. I know of a lot of small companies that might employ 20 people. And as was mentioned by, I forget your name, sorry, a lot of these companies don't want to get any bigger because risk is a huge impact on these small businesses. And I'm speaking to one local business at the moment that's having to pay off men because of issues with the company that they're contracted to build houses for, which obviously I won't go into. But the risk that they carry is quite significant, and I'm wondering, can we in some ways support these small businesses and in the consideration of the fact that they're taking substantial risk sometimes in taking on a contract, and the impact can also be on the local economy. This particular business has had to pay off 3 apprentices, which is really sad, and he's very upset about it. So. And I know I really congratulate the officials also on their work to accommodate the lack of HR in small businesses, and in particular the fair work requirements. I have a particular affinity for fair work, and it's a really important issue. But I did respond to the Scottish Government in a previous employment, a 20-page submission on why it's different in small businesses who don't have HR. They don't have the same ability to set up training programs for these buildings, and I know that you're addressing that, which is really, really commendable. And I'm encouraged by the increase in local businesses that you have taken on in contracts. So my query is, how can we build on that? How can we support smaller business where risk of taking on a contract with a much larger business sometimes can be too scary to take on? In this particular case, the company that is withholding £750,000 from this small business, he can't compete in the terms of legal advice and things like that, and even advice when they're signing a contract in terms of the contract obligations. Does it include inflation, that sort of thing? So I'm commending you on your work with engaging in local employers, but if there's any way we can further help these local people, particularly when they're taking on modern apprenticeships, and that's picking up on John's. We'll have to make sure that they do take on apprenticeships and they are supported in taking on the apprenticeships, because one of the problems with small business taking on an apprenticeship is lack of knowledge of how to support that apprentice. So these are my questions. How much more we can do that we're already doing to help small businesses help the community and also manage their risk in contractual considerations, because big companies have always got that factored in. Do you understand my questions? Because I've got on a wee bit.
Karen, can you offer an answer there?
Yeah, I'll try. Thanks, Chair. So I think one of the key things for us is around ensuring what we ask for is proportionate, and again, not just seeking for people taking out new apprenticeships. It should be around job retention, and we do ask questions around job retention and completion of apprenticeships as well. So actually we have targets that seek completion of apprenticeships, particularly if we're aware of a local business base who have, like the individual business that you referenced in your question, who have apprentices who are nearing completion, then we would seek to attract points through the process for completion where we know that would be be to the benefit of the local community. Similarly, in terms of that support for small local businesses as well, what we're seeking to do is through some of the larger organisations that are placed on a contract through ourselves, or indeed some of our legal firms, for example, they commit to community benefits to actually provide mentorship and support to small local businesses. So it's just trying to find out where the needs are and where there's a desire from the local supply base for us to try and marry that up as well. And in terms of some support for delivery of apprenticeships, we do that through our colleagues in employability. So where we get a commitment to deliver in relation to some of the training programmes, again, we provide that support through our employability colleagues.
No, that's great. That's very encouraging. Thank you.
Grant, we have Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Johnston.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, there's a couple of points, if it's okay. I'll just go through them by page. So page 103 and 105 both include a line referencing GOS. I think it's probably a duplicate, but it's just sometimes you don't always catch these things. So I don't know if that's just a wee error that needs corrected, if you've picked that one up, because there's two lines for the same thing.
One is an extension within the current year and the other is the longer term contract.
Okay, appreciate that, didn't realise. The other one is page 114, and this will be of relevance to local members in Annandale North, but I'm wondering, there was a contract title in there which makes reference to McGerrow Park and a cairn, which was never an agreed element of anything, so I'm just wondering how it found its way into our contract management system, but there's no cairn to be going forward with that project, and I think we're still actually detailing or confirming what pieces of work will go ahead. So I was just curious how that would have maybe got in there. That's something happy to pick up offline, because it might be a particular detail from that department. And similarly, there's a couple of references to agency, which is obviously one of the things that was highlighted in the main report, I think, or the introduction. There's no cost either to the corporate or the social care agency staff. Do we know what extent or what sums of money we're talking about in terms of current use of agency staff and what that might translate to in terms of a more formal contract value? And similarly for PEF, and I appreciate this is over a number of years, but if this is a contract value, I'm just sort of wondering what's the different role between head teachers in determining PEF spend and corporately determine PEF spend through education, because it is one of these ones that seems to, there's a 22 million allocation towards PEF, but who decides how that's spent, and is that within a framework, or is there local choice from head teachers through consultation with their parent councils and school community, for example? Thank you.
Have you had a chance, Karen, to note all those questions down?
I hope so. So the first one, I appreciate the opportunity, Councillor Thompson, to have that offline discussion regarding the play park one, and I know we've had some previous correspondence around some of the other parks, so I think some offline discussion would be helpful around that. In relation to the agency workers, we're currently spending around 1.3 million across both social care and the corporate expenditure in that area. That evolves and changes on a fairly regular basis, so it's something we're monitoring, and we've split that project into one to look at the adult and social care aspect, and the other to look at the corporate side as well. And there'll be future updates to come in future reports around how we've addressed that. And the last question, I believe, is in relation to PEF and the role of the corporate contract and the local decision making within schools. So the PEF framework that we have procured almost works as a pre-vetting and pre-assessment of providers, which is then the decision making then lies within the local schools for the head teachers through the community and parent councils to then determine how the funding's being applied, and that gives us a compliant route to contracting with pre-vetted providers, but that remains open for providers to apply at any time for us to assess and pre-vet them.
Thank you. Just on that one there, so the framework might be there for schools to avail themselves of, but they might choose to do their own thing. Is that right?
No, so where the framework gives them the list of providers that are able to provide any of the services that would meet the criteria under PEF. So there shouldn't be arrangements going on beyond that framework agreement. Everything should start to come through the framework. Obviously, it's in its infancy. It's just recently been awarded. So I think at the moment you might still see pockets of other things happening just as that becomes fully embedded within the education settings.
Just, if I may, Chair, finally on that, so, because one of the things that often ask at area committees, and this is probably common across the region, is just about that more detail around the impact of use of PEF, for example, in local schools. But we'll start to be able to see, presumably, because this will all be coming from that framework, potentially what each school is spending money on and what impact that may be having in terms of value for money or achieving attainment or whatever.
Absolutely, over time, having things go through the corporate framework will allow improved reporting and monitoring of the effectiveness of it, yes.
And Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. It's page 97 and it's the Supplier Development Programme. And I know you put a lot of work into this, and I see you ran 3 courses but only had 1 attendee at these courses. Have you any insight as to why the take-up's low, or are you reviewing it?
So this is something that's constantly under review, and we're trying to promote some of the opportunities for the online training through other mechanisms as well. So we're using some of our more targeted events to try and get to that. The hard bit is trying to reach those that are not engaging. So again, we're constantly under review as to how we can use alternative channels to try and improve the uptake on the provision that's made available.
Thank you, Karen. Just on the back of Councillor Johnston's point there, obviously the attendance, the numbers do kind of jump out of the page, only being 1 attendee. For the smaller businesses within the region, obviously you're saying that things are under constant review. Is there a possibility to remove maybe some of the bureaucracy or paperwork for these smaller businesses that maybe don't have time to come to these events, or just really struggle with filling out the paperwork required to get the contract?
Thanks for the question, Chair. So these events are specifically run to try and support small businesses to understand what's required in terms of the minimum requirements we have around paperwork. They're specifically now delivered. They used to be in person. These are now delivered through online support tools, so that they can be businesses can drop in and out of them as they've got the time to do so, to make them a bit more accessible, particularly for small businesses. I think the earlier point is well made by Councillor Johnston in relation to how well known that is and how we market that. So, but the intention is there that they are accessible for small businesses in particular.
Thank you, Karen. We have Councillor Dennerley.
Thank you, Chair. Page 109. There are lots of details there, and there are one that I've spotted in particular about the Lockerbie Station car park. And in addition, that there'll be some advanced funding for that. I believe it's to stage 3. Now, I think on my last visit to Lockerbie Station, I remember how busy it can be. I was travelling to Edinburgh at the time. So can I just clarify then, is it a council car park, or is it British Rail, ScotRail? Who's the ownership? Where does that lie? And the extension, again, where's the responsibility for that, and who would supply that?
Thank you, Councillor Dennerley. Can you come back at all on that one, Karen?
I'm afraid I'm not certain in terms of the ownership. I believe it's council, but I'm not certain around that.
Chair, maybe I can put a bit of clarity on that, being Chair of Westrans. It is council-owned car park, but it's Westrans board that's actually taken this forward, this particular funding on the phase 3, and then after, or hopefully once that's completed, we'll move on to phase 2. I know it's a bit sort of back to front here, but I think we needed phase 3 sorted before we can move on to phase 2, so to allow the transfer of cars from one car park to another.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Does that go some way to answer your question, Councillor Dennerley?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Absolutely, that's great clarity. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's very commendable that we've actually surpassed the target, so we've got 35.66% being spent locally on page 97. I think it's even more commendable because really we're never going to get 100%. So I'm just wondering what a realistic target is, our maximum target, because I think it's probably got to be more something like 50% of all the contracts awarded, because obviously with just 16 large companies and kind of 45 medium companies. This was discussed at the housing seminar recently, and it was also discussed at the rep last week and it was mainly about housing demand and how RSLs are finding it difficult to employ local companies, and things like that. And I think SOSI are looking at that now, how they build within the borders and within Dumfries and Galloway to develop more companies. But realistically, I just wonder what a realistic target is, because, I think if it's 35%, but realistically, we could only really achieve 50%. And a lot of the contracts as well, the larger contracts, are going out of the region because we don't have any suppliers that can actually fill that demand for those contracts.
I would imagine, obviously, Councillor Marshall, that we'd want to maximise, where at all possible, the amount of local businesses that we are undertaking to do these contracts. But I don't know if Karen, wants to come back in on that one.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Marshall. In terms of the current target, we have set that at 34.5%, and that was based on an ambition to improve on where we were the previous year, which was just over 32%. So we are seeing that continue to improve. One of the difficulties we have is in relation to being able to track the genuine economic impact around some of this. So we always have a profile of spend, and the example I usually cite is around care homes. So we will have care homes who are employing local people and spending money directly back into the local economy. However, their registered office will be out with the region. However, they will have a significant impact in terms of the local economy and communities that they operate in. So it's always really difficult for us to capture and reflect that, and that's a challenge and something I've been grappling with for some time, and work with colleagues nationally around how we can genuinely capture the wider economic impact that procurement spend has. So an area for continued development, but I think in terms of our direct spend at that 35%, again, that's compared nationally and is quite a good performer, and we frequently get asked by Scottish Government to do some kind of toolbox talks and things around the work that we've already done locally.
Thanks, Karen. Well done.
Grand, thank you, Karen. And Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, sorry to come back to you. Yeah, it was just to really double check, and this is maybe it's either a cruel trick or I'm just thick. So it's back to the GOS thing again. I was just looking at that again because I thought, maybe it's just been re-awarded. But it's the same contract reference number, it's the same title, it's the same date, it's the same amount, it's exactly the same duplicated. So I'm just thinking, has it been re-awarded twice then on the 26th of May 2023 for the same amount? Thank you.
Happy to go back and check for accuracy. However, I'm clear that there were two contracts being awarded for the GOS one, hence the reason of my previous response, but can check for accuracy in terms of if the report's pulled through the same line twice instead of picking up the longer term award as well, and refer back in terms of accuracy.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yep, that's grand. I think Karen will come back to you, Councillor Thompson, once you can investigate that. Wonderful. So no further questions. The recommendations. Members are asked to note the content of the procurement and commissioning performance update for Q1 of the financial year 23-24 as provided at the appendix. All noted? Item number 11. Financial Code 4 Income Collection Debt Write-Offs. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report presents members with the details of debt written off under delegated procedures over the 6-month period to 20th September 2023 for their scrutiny. Lindsay Wilson and Paul Garrett are here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Hagman, I think, was first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the report and thank you, officers, for bringing this forward today. I appreciate we have a 6-monthly one, but I'm looking at the details within here. So we've got council tax, non-domestic rates, housing benefit overpayment, but there's no mention of school meal debt. Now, I appreciate that it was the 27th of June at full council that we agreed to write off the school meal debt. Will that be captured in a future report, or does that get captured separately within the Education Committee? I'm just not quite sure where that gets reported, because I would have thought that it would have come under the income collection, although I do note that it's unrecoverable debt. So I'm just wondering, will school meal debt be included in this?
Yes, it is. Any school meal debt that's still outstanding will be picked up under the sundry debtors line, Councillor Hagman.
Right, okay, that's fine.
The sundry debtors, just to explain to councillors, that the sales ledger issue sales ledger invoices for a whole range of council sort of services, including the school meal services. Obviously, with school meals, I think the facilities management service who run that school meals, they try and informally to collect a lot of this sort of debt before we sort of formally go through a sort of formal invoice process. But anything that is invoiced will be and written off and shown against that particular line. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask what else is covered under the sundry debtors, because obviously we've got school meal. It'd be quite useful to know what else is captured within that and whether that can be followed up after. That's fine too.
It's a whole range of different types of expenditure. I say the bulk of it's probably social care related, care at home, residential care, where there's been some form of, say, default on the payment. But it covers a whole plethora of anything that the council is charging for, and if there is a invoice and the invoice isn't particularly paid, then it is actually sort of pursued. So it covers can cover just about anything the council's raising income and expenditure against.
Perfect, thank you.
Grand. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's on page 122 where it says the council tax is at zero. This is for £10,000 or above. I'm not aware of anybody having that kind of sort of outstanding debt unless you're in the higher council tax bracket and you've missed several years, I suppose. It was just to sort of get a wee bit of clarity on that point, if I could, Chair. Thank you.
Paul, would you like to come in there? Or Lindsay, sorry?
I was going to say it's rare that there is any sort of council tax debt in that particular section over the 10,000, as Councillor Campbell explained. But we still have it because it does happen very occasionally, but pretty rarely, to be honest.
Okay, do we have any further questions? No. We'll go to recommendations. Members are asked to note and scrutinise the write-offs from the following accounts which have been written off under delegated authority. 1. The 3 non-domestic rates and 1 sales ledger account where the amount being written off exceeds £10,000 as summarised at paragraph 4.7 and detailed in Appendix 1. And 2. Accounts below £10,000 for council tax, non-domestic rates, sundry debts and overpaid housing benefit, which has been written off as summarised in paragraph 4.9. Noted. Item number 12. The Head of Finance and Procurement Service Business Plan performance for 6 months to the 30th of September 2023. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report presents members with the Head of Finance and Procurement's 6-month assessment on the progress of delivery of the 2023-24 service plan and includes health and safety performance information. Paul Garrett is here to assist with any members' questions. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome the report. I see there's only one that's in the red, you know, the target not met, but particularly wanted to pick up on the risk register, and on page 145, at the very bottom of the page. Now, the Council has agreed a budget process which incorporates the development of detailed services, etc., etc. Now, the budget process and the timetable were agreed at full Council in June this year, and the budget development is now being taken forward. In the mitigation contingency, it says the agreed budget process includes the development of budget plans on a 3-year basis to ensure ongoing financial sustainability is fully taken into account. The Council has agreed to set that the budget setting principles. So maybe my question would be around the risk of, you know, if any particular group decided to put in a 1-year budget, for example, would it be deemed incompetent in that sense if we're trying to look at a 3-year fiscal, financial sustainability? Thanks, Chair.
Could you speak to that risk, Paul?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to be clear, the statutory requirement on the Council is to set a 1-year balanced budget. That's what we're absolutely required to do. Members have recognised it's good practice to seek to present financial plans beyond the 1-year period, and the budget process reflects that and seeks members to set the upcoming year plus 2 further years on an indicative basis. So that's a good budget process, but the actual requirement on councils is to balance their budget annually on a 1-year basis. So that's the specific requirement the council faces.
Thank you, Paul. Does that satisfy the question?
No, it's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Grant, thank you. Do we have any? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just on the actual performance report and plan. So it's on page 139. It was just a question around percentage of budget holders who've undertaken relevant training, flow training. And I was just wondering, do we still use flow? And are those figures correct if that's the case? Thank you.
Can you come in there, Paul, for that one?
Yes, the answer to that is yes on both counts. We do still use Flow, which is online training platform. We've recently updated the modules in relation to budget management to reflect the updated financial regulations. This committee agreed during the summer, so that's very much something that's still in practice. And that 100% is reflected the fact that we require all council budget holders to have undertaken mandatory training before they're able to exercise their duties, their requirements in terms of the budget holder role. So that's something we ensure is in place across all the council's budget holders.
Thank you, Paul. You coming back in, Councillor Thompson?
It was actually on a separate point, but it was to do with, and I'll come on to the next item, but on page 145, I think it was just to do with the risk matrix there for potential for significant unanticipated expenditure, particularly things that are key to council strategies, etc. And obviously MBT insurance is a paper that we're going to hear about. But I just wondered, is that where that would sit? Because it's not ideal getting homologated reports generally, and there'll be reasons for that presumably. But given the sort of scale that we're talking about in terms of that increase and uplift in the insurance premium, that looks like a kind of key risk in terms of that where that fits in with the wider service. And I'm just wondering if there's any comment on that at this point. Or we'll pick it up in the next item. Happy to do that. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to come back in now?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and that is the risk that would fit under. In the scheme of things, I mean, it's almost £500,000 of an increase. It's a material issue, but in the scheme of the council's overall finances, it's certainly manageable. And part of the mitigations that we've set out in this paper here are some of the things that the council has at a corporate level in terms of maintenance of balance, maintenance of reserves and contingencies to try and address these type of pressures. But I think that you're right that this is the kind of area that this would come under.
Grand. Do we have any further questions? We'll move to recommendations. It was 1, to review the summary of performance for the finance and procurement plan for the period of 1st of April to 30th September 2022, which includes the council plan delivery, service plan delivery, change and improvement activities, success measures, service-specific, council-wide, including health and safety, and local government benchmarking framework, and the management of the risks within the Service Risk Register as an Appendix 1. And 2, to scrutinise the exception reporting and consider whether the actions proposed are adequate to improve the performance and future monitoring of areas which have not yet met the target. We happy? Move on to item number 13 for homologation. The increase in the Waste Mechanical Biological Treatment MBT Facility Insurance Premium report by Director, Economy and Resources. This report seeks member endorsement of the decision taken under Standing Order 19.2 as an expedited matter in relation to the increased insurance premium for the Council's Waste and Mechanical Biological Treatment Facility. Gillian Ross is here to assist with members' questions. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it was just, obviously, I've teed this up from the last item, but in terms of this, I mean, and given the time scales of this, because this expired in this September, I'm conscious that, and I know we're an inclusive council, but we did have a leaders panel in October, and I don't really think this was featured in any particular way about that, but given that we've established that it would fit under the risks that are significant in the previous one, I'm just hoping that going forward, and I appreciate the need for a homologated report, but I think there could have been a heads up to leaders given the significance of this and the cost. So I would just ask if that could be the way we do business going forward if things like this are going to come up. Thank you.
I think at this point I'll bring Lorna in.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. I think, I fully accept that and the opportunity to brief members on these matters. This wasn't intended in terms of withholding that from members at large, notwithstanding leaders' panels. So, and the report explains why the proximity of a homologated report's there. I'm happy to answer any further questions on that. But it's a fair point. We rarely have homologated reports, and the opportunity to socialise them with all members as we go through that process and following is something we'll certainly take up, and we'll pick up with making sure that's considered as part of the kind of processes as well.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's kind of disappointing to see that insurance for this particular facility is increased so dramatically. 4.5 on page 162 says the main risk is serious damage to the MBT plant as regarded as a fire risk. Of all the time I've been a councillor, and probably even before that, I don't even think we've had any sort of fire risk in that particular plant. But I mean, it's the way insurance companies seem to operate. If you have it somewhere else in the country, that they look upon everybody being a complete risk. So it's just to wonder, for the future. I mean, it was a last minute thing that one of these companies actually came in and bailed us out at the 11th hour, I believe. Where we're going to be next year or the year after that. So I would welcome a report of what we're actually, intending to do with the ABT or how we manage our waste in the future. Thank you, Chair.
And I think Paul would like to respond there.
Yes, thanks, Chair. No, I think that's really helpful. Absolutely. In terms of the first point, in terms of fire risk, to be fair, it is a key concern for the service, a key concern across all these type of facilities, and we do have good fire suppression measures in the plant at the minute to minimise that risk. So it is a fair point that insurers are making, but it is the case that the risk appetite for insurers in terms of waste facilities has changed of late, and we've seen that as part of this process. But I think the other point is really important, that it's really key that we have a clear understanding of the ongoing use of the MBT facility and where insurance fits in with that going forward, well before the next renewal date. There is obviously work being undertaken at the minute in terms of the Council's overall waste strategy, and part of that work is looking at our ongoing infrastructure needs to support our waste service, including the MBT, the Zero Waste Park, and so on. So it's really important that that work is undertaken, and that we come back with members with information on that well before the end of the current policy period. But that's something that's being progressed with the service at the minute.
That's been helpful. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chair.
I think we have Councillor McGregor.
Thanks very much, Chair. Noted Councillor Thompson's point, and I'll ensure that all group leaders are informed of similar things in the future. It's just going back to Councillor Campbell's point around the sort of the nature of the risk. And I think we're all aware of the volatility of lithium-ion batteries, and I think it's that within disposable vapes that are going into general waste and other products that have got lithium-ion in them. And I think that that's what's increased the risk, that at some sites across the UK there's been an uptick in fires. And it's maybe a wee bit of a sugary peg, but it does raise another issue around that lithium-ion management of batteries. We had an incident in my ward last year where electric vehicle on a transporter ignited, and it's very, very difficult to put out. It's not the same as an ordinary fire, and we had to locate a site within Annandale North where the car could literally burn for 24 hours, managed and maintained by the fire service. And I think it's just looking at that unintended consequences of products that maybe haven't been so commonly used in the past that are becoming more common now, and just looking at a strategy across the region for management of that risk, whether it be an electric vehicle that ignites or whether it be a disposable vape that's gone into general waste. So I know we can't manage it all, but we're dealing with factors that we maybe historically haven't had to think about.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. I think Councillor Campbell wants to come back in.
Thanks for letting me back in. Yeah, I do get Councillor McGregor's point on lithium batteries, etc. However, it would be welcome if we could actually have that noted, or at least explained if it's in the actual, the insurance schedule, shall we say, that is the actual risk. I do take a point that, there are fire risks with lithium batteries, but unless that's clearly explained on the schedule, we may be paying a little bit more than what we should do, but if it is in the schedule, then I take that point. Thank you, Chair.
Is that something, Paul, that would be specifically noted as a reasoning for the substantial increase?
It was certainly part of the discussions with insurers when we were looking at the renewal. They did identify the increased use of lithium batteries as being an area of concern, and part of the work that was being done was actually how do we identify where that is actually present in our waste. So it certainly is one of the contributing factors to the increase in cost that we've seen, and this ongoing concern that insurers have in relation to the risk associated with these type of facilities.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it is a sad indictment where we are at the moment currently with lithium batteries, and especially vapes. It is a substantial increase, but to offset that, the cost of having to utilise another temporary measure facility, if something were to happen to the current one, you can clearly see the figures in the report that, yes, it is substantial, but it's outweighed massively by having to utilise another temporary site if that did come to pass. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Ingalls.
Thanks, Chair. Page 163, the last bullet point of 4.11, queries whether self-insurance would be an option. It might be sort of time barred for this one, but is that worth looking at for next year? Whether that could be taken into account for next year?
Paul, could you give us some clarity there?
Absolutely. Obviously self-insurance effectively means taking the risk on ourselves from our own insurance fund. It was part of the considerations this time round because of the increase in cost, but in the balance of risk, as just been reflected by the Chair, it was felt that continuation of cover was important. But I think one of the things that will help inform the approach going forward in terms of potential self-insurance is just what is the role of the MBT in a future waste service. What would we do if the MBT was badly damaged or out of operation? And I think we need to get clarity in relation to those questions before we can take an informed decision on whether or not self-insurance is important. But just in terms of the same question that Councillor Campbell asked in terms of can we move that forward, absolutely we'll try and make sure that this comes back to members well in advance of the end of the current policy period.
Grand, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Given the premium, the cost of this premium, you know, if we're going to spend that on insurance anyway, if we had set that aside on a yearly basis over a period of time, then that would mitigate any issues that we found should we have a fire in the future. So I'm just wondering whether that's something that could be considered in the future. Thanks.
Could you add to that, Paul?
Absolutely. I mean, just as I was saying, we will look, we have done and we will continue to look at whether self-insurance is the right approach. Obviously, the amount this year is substantially greater than it was the year before, and it went up then as well. So it really, going forward, this is becoming more and more of an issue, and that kind of balance of risk is shifting a bit. So I think we'll look at that, but as I say, it's having real clarity on what would we do if the MBT was badly damaged or lost, not just in the short term, but in the medium and longer terms, and that's very much part of the waste strategy that's coming forward. So hopefully that will come forward well in advance of when we need it in order to inform future renewal considerations.
Grand, thank you, Paul. I don't see any further speakers, so we'll move to the recommendations. As number 1, to endorse the decision of the Chief Executive taken in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee as a matter of ordinary business that required to be dealt with expeditiously, to accept the significant increase in insurance premium for the Council's MBT facility, to ensure continuity of provision, and number 2, note the increase in the insurance premium of £428,000 will be funded through a combination of existing waste service budget resources and the waste review reserve. So we're endorsing 1 and noting 2. Grand. Item number 14. Any other business deemed urgent by the Chair? I don't believe anything has been brought to my attention. So can I thank all members today for their participation? Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.